When we unearth the colossal skeletons of prehistoric giants, we instinctively assume that massive size equals ultimate danger. But what if the science of paleontology tells a completely different story? What if the largest creatures to ever walk the earth were merely gentle plant eaters, surviving purely on bulk rather than the instinct to hunt and kill? A massive claw, a monstrous skull, a deafening roar echoing through a dense prehistoric forest. Are these the definitive marks of a hunter, or merely biological illusions designed to deceive? Could a predator with a body no larger than a modern turkey actually be a far more efficient assassin than a towering giant? How did peaceful herbivores evolve razor-sharp bone scythes nearly 1 meter long just to defend themselves against overwhelming threats? And when the most catastrophic event in the history of our planet darkened the skies, why did the undisputed rulers of the land perish, while a tiny fraction of their bloodline quietly survived to soar through the skies today? We are about to decode the ancient fossils to reveal the true nature of prehistoric survival. What really happened to the most dangerous creatures ever to walk the earth? Welcome to Quiet Expeditions. If you enjoy our journey through the mysteries of the natural world, please subscribe to our channel and let this ancient world guide you into a peaceful rest. Are you ready to step back in time? Let us drift back across the vast ocean of time, far beyond the familiar landscapes of our modern world, to an era when the earth was cloaked in endless emerald green. Imagine breathing in an atmosphere thick with humidity and rich with oxygen, a primordial greenhouse that nurtured life on a scale we can barely comprehend today. Towering conifer forests pierced the sky, their needles catching the golden sunlight of a prehistoric dawn, while the forest floor was a dense, unbroken carpet of ancient ferns and cycads. In this world, the ground trembled with a rhythmic, thunderous pulse. This was the reign of the dinosaurs, a dynasty that stretched across a staggering expanse of time. For more than 160 million years of dominating the Earth, many dinosaur species grew to enormous sizes. When we step into the quiet halls of a modern museum and cast our gaze upward at the towering frameworks of petrified bone, our human instincts immediately take over. The sheer scale of these colossal skeletons casts long shadows across our imagination. The moment humans see the massive skeletons of dinosaurs, it is easy to believe that the larger a creature is, the more dangerous it must be. Our minds, evolved to fear predators in the dark, naturally equate immense physical presence with an insatiable appetite for destruction. We picture a world where every giant was a ruthless monster, a landscape defined only by endless violence and towering terror. But as we dig deeper into the sedimentary rock and listen to the silent stories etched into fossilized bone, science has uncovered a shocking truth. The earth beneath our feet holds secrets that challenge our deepest assumptions. Those skeletons can sometimes deceive us. The immense rib cages and pillar-like legs that command our awe did not always belong to creatures of nightmares. In fact, the ancient ecosystems were far more balanced, complex, and surprisingly peaceful than our sensationalized myths would have us believe. To understand this ancient reality, we must look at the biological mechanics of gigantism. Growing to the size of a modern building requires an unimaginable amount of energy. If these titans were all apex predators, the ecosystem would have collapsed under the weight of their hunger, as there simply would not have been enough prey to sustain them. Therefore, nature designed a different path. Most of these giants were simply herbivores, surviving through their strength and size rather than their ability to hunt and kill. These monumental creatures, known as sauropods, were the gentle titans of the Mesozoic era. Their towering necks, stretching gracefully into the canopy, were not weapons of war, but biological harvesting tools, perfectly engineered to strip foliage from the highest branches where no other animal could reach. Imagine a creature weighing as much as a herd of elephants, moving with a slow, deliberate grace through the morning mist. Their hearts, massive muscular pumps the size of small cars, beat with a slow, heavy rhythm to push blood up their incredibly long necks. Their stomachs acted as vast fermentation vats, slowly breaking down the tough, fibrous plant matter over days or even weeks. They did not need sharp teeth to tear flesh, nor did they require the explosive speed of an assassin. Their sheer physical volume was their greatest shield. By becoming a mountain of living flesh and bone, they effectively removed themselves from the menu of most predators. They survived not by dealing death, but by becoming too monumental to conquer. This revelation forces us to reconsider the very nature of threat in the natural world. If the absolute largest animals to ever walk the earth were peaceful browsers of the prehistoric forest canopies, we must ask ourselves what truly defines a lethal force. The fossil record whispers to us that danger is rarely about sheer mass. It is a complex equation of biology, evolution, and the fundamental mechanics of survival. A massive body is a strategy for enduring, for weathering the storms of a harsh world, but it is not necessarily a design for conquering it. As the morning sun rises higher over this ancient fern-covered landscape, casting long, peaceful shadows behind the grazing giants, a subtle rustle in the dense underbrush reminds us that true peril often comes in entirely unexpected and sometimes beautifully deceptive forms. As we leave behind the towering, peaceful giants grazing in the sunlit canopy, we must journey deeper into the shadows of the ancient forest to ask a fundamental question. So what truly makes a creature dangerous? It is not weight, but the way it survives. The architecture of survival in the prehistoric world was incredibly diverse, and danger was not always synonymous with the urge to consume flesh. Our journey takes us to a specific point in time, around 70 million years ago during the late Cretaceous period, where Earth was a harsh world where giant dinosaurs competed for survival. In this intensely competitive greenhouse world, the air was heavy with moisture, and the landscape was a dense mosaic of ancient conifers, broad-leafed trees, and early flowering plants. The ecosystem was a relentless theater of adaptation. But what is strange is that evolution did not only create killers, it also created creatures carrying terrifying weapons that never hunted at all. We are conditioned by popular culture to look at a formidable set of biological weaponry and immediately assume it belongs to a ruthless assassin. Yet the fossil record holds a mirror to our assumptions and reveals a profound truth. This shows that nature does not create monsters in the way humans imagine. Imagine walking through this damp, prehistoric woodland. The sound of snapping branches and the rhythmic crunching of leaves echo through the mist. Through the dense foliage, a silhouette begins to emerge, a shape so bizarre and imposing that it defies logic. And sometimes the most dangerous creature is not the one that looks the most like a monster, but the one we never expected. Before you stands a creature that could grow nearly 10 meters long, weighs several tons, and possess a massive body structure that would make any predator think twice. That creature was Therizinosaurus, the scythe lizard, one of the strangest creatures to ever exist on Earth. If you were to gaze upon its skeleton in a museum, your eyes would immediately be drawn to its forelimbs. Some species possess claws nearly a meter long like weapons of destruction. To put that into perspective, these bony appendages were the length of a human arm, terminating in sweeping curved points. In life, these bone cores were sheathed in a thick, hardened layer of keratin, the exact same dense protein that forms your fingernails and the formidable horns of modern rhinoceroses. This keratin sheath would have made the claws even longer, sharper, and far more durable than the naked fossils we find today. Looking at these magnificent, terrifying scythes, one would immediately assume this creature was the apex predator of its domain, an unparalleled hunter that slashed through the prehistoric underbrush in search of prey. Yet they only ate plants. Therizinosaurus was not a predator. It was a herbivore. This presents us with a fascinating evolutionary paradox. Why would a peaceful plant eater require the most exaggerated and lethal-looking claws in the history of terrestrial vertebrate evolution? To understand this, we must look at the creature's entire anatomy and the world it inhabited. In a world where sharp teeth and powerful jaws determine survival, Therizinosaurus chose a completely different path. Its body was entirely specialized for a diet of vegetation. It possessed a small head atop a long, slender neck, equipped with a beak designed to accurately crop leaves and specialized teeth to lightly shred plant material. Because plant matter is incredibly difficult to digest, requiring extensive fermentation, the creature had an exceptionally wide, barrel-shaped torso to house a massive, complex digestive tract. To support this heavy, cumbersome body, it walked upright on two strong, pillared hind legs, moving with a slow, deliberate waddle rather than the swift, agile sprint of a hunter. In that environment, Therizinosaurus, despite being a plant eater, could not survive through gentleness and slowness alone because danger was always lurking from predators. The late Cretaceous Asian landscape was prowled by some of the most specialized and efficient carnivorous dinosaurs the world had ever seen. A slow-moving, large-bellied herbivore would normally be nothing more than an abundant source of protein for a hungry predator. If it could not outrun its enemies, and if it could not hide its massive bulk, it had to find another way to secure its existence. Therefore, evolution created a strange creature with enormous claws that helped it pull down high branches for food, while also becoming a terrifying tool of self-defense. The primary function of these magnificent biological scythes was surprisingly delicate. Imagine this towering creature standing at the edge of a forest clearing. It reaches up with its heavily muscled arms anchored to massive shoulder blades, designed to withstand immense tension. It uses those 1-meter-long claws not to strike, but to gently hook over the thick, leafy branches of a towering conifer. With a slow, powerful pull, it bends the branch down to the level of its beak, calmly stripping the nutritious foliage. The claws acted as gigantic, specialized rakes, allowing Therizinosaurus to access a high canopy food source that ground-dwelling herbivores could never hope to reach. Through this peaceful act of feeding, the scythe lizard secured its place in the ecosystem. It carved out a niche where it did not have to compete with the herds of horned dinosaurs grazing on the low ferns. But nature is a system of dual purposes. The very tools that allowed this gentle giant to harvest the forest canopy also provided it with an impenetrable shield. When the rustling in the bushes ceased to be the wind, and instead became the calculated stalking of a hungry carnivore, those delicate harvesting hooks transformed instantly into weapons of immense destructive potential. The true genius of Therizinosaurus was not in hunting, but in making the cost of hunting it so unthinkably high that even the kings of the Cretaceous would pause in the shadows, reconsidering their deadly intentions. The ancient forests of late Cretaceous Asia were not merely a picturesque backdrop of towering trees and gentle mist. They were a theater of intense survival, where every shadow could conceal a lethal threat, and every rustle in the undergrowth could signal the arrival of an apex predator. In this unforgiving ecosystem, the gentle giant known as Therizinosaurus had to navigate a landscape shared by some of the most formidable hunters to ever walk the earth. Among these threats, one creature stood above the rest as the ultimate arbiter of life and death in this specific region. When facing Tarbosaurus, the Asian relative of T-Rex with razor-sharp teeth and overwhelming strength, Therizinosaurus would seem like an easy target. To truly understand the gravity of this prehistoric encounter, we must visualize the sheer terror that Tarbosaurus represented. As a close cousin to the famous Tyrannosaurus rex, Tarbosaurus was a masterful biological machine designed exclusively for predation. Imagine a carnivore stretching up to 12 meters in length, equipped with a massive skull that was essentially a specialized weapon of destruction. Its jaws were lined with dozens of serrated, dagger-like teeth, anchored by jaw muscles capable of delivering a bite force that could easily shatter solid bone. It walked entirely on two incredibly muscular hind legs, balancing its heavy head with a long, stiff tail. Its eyes, facing forward to provide stereoscopic vision, were locked onto the movements of the prehistoric forest, calculating distance and trajectory with deadly precision. Tarbosaurus relied on its overwhelming physical power and the sheer terror it induced to overpower the large herbivores of its time. Now, place the slow, lumbering Therizinosaurus in the path of this apex predator. From a purely mechanical standpoint, the plant-eating scythe lizard was at a severe disadvantage. Its enormous, barrel-shaped body, perfectly designed for fermenting tough vegetation, made it incredibly heavy and cumbersome. Its wide hips and short, pillared legs were built entirely to support massive weight, not for explosive acceleration. This herbivore could not run fast enough to escape, nor did it have powerful jaws to fight back. If a Tarbosaurus were to launch an ambush from the dense tree line, a foot race would be entirely out of the question. For Therizinosaurus, fleeing would only trigger the predator's instinct to chase, resulting in a swift and brutal end. Yet, the genius of evolution is that it provides solutions when brute force and speed are absent. Survival is not always about running away, and it is not always about fighting to the death. Sometimes, survival is about mastering the art of psychological warfare. However, instead of fleeing, it possessed something that could make even the most aggressive predators hesitate. The slow-moving herbivore held a secret weapon that forced the king of the Asian landscape into a sudden, jarring halt. Mass savage claws nearly 1 meter long on its front limbs. These incredibly long, keratin-sheathed bone cores were the ultimate biological deterrent. These claws were not only used for gathering food, but also served as a terrifying defensive weapon. Imagine the scene as the tension peaks. The Tarbosaurus steps out from the shadows of the ancient conifers, its massive jaws parting slightly, ready to deliver a bone-crushing bite to what it assumes is a helpless, slow-moving meal. But instead of turning its back and attempting a futile escape, the Therizinosaurus does something entirely unexpected. It stands its ground. It shifts its immense weight back onto its sturdy hind legs and heavy tail, anchoring itself to the earth. When threatened, the Therizinosaurus could raise its body, spread its front limbs, and use its long claws like living blades to intimidate its enemies. This sudden transformation in posture is a masterpiece of visual deception and intimidation. By raising its torso, the Therizinosaurus instantly increases its perceived height, towering over the approaching predator. But the true psychological strike comes from the arms. It spreads its muscular forelimbs wide, displaying the magnificent, terrifying, meter-long scythes. The sunlight catches the hardened keratin of the claws, turning them into a flashing wall of lethal weaponry. The herbivore is no longer a passive mountain of meat. It is transformed into a fortress of bristling blades. It might hiss. It might swing its arms in wide, sweeping arcs, creating a physical barrier of deadly sharp points that the Tarbosaurus must navigate if it wishes to land a bite. In the natural world, whether millions of years ago or in the savannas of today, apex predators are inherently cautious creatures. They cannot afford to be reckless. A predator must secure its food while expending the least amount of energy, and, most importantly, avoiding any significant injury. For a colossal hunter like Tarbosaurus, a broken leg, a fractured jaw, or a deep infected laceration is an absolute death sentence. If it cannot hunt at peak efficiency, it will slowly starve. Therefore, every hunt is a complex calculation of risk versus reward. A powerful strike from these claws might not necessarily kill a Tarbosaurus, but even a deep wound could be enough to make an apex predator reconsider before continuing the hunt. The Tarbosaurus looks at the massive swinging scythes. It calculates the reach of those living blades and the muscular power behind them. It realizes that lunging forward to secure a bite on the neck of the Therizinosaurus means putting its own eyes, throat, and vital organs directly into the path of those 1-meter claws. The risk is simply too high. The equation of survival shifts heavily in favor of the herbivore. The predator stops its advance, lowers its head, and slowly backs away into the shadows of the ancient forest, deciding that it is far wiser to search for an easier, less dangerous meal. This silent standoff in the prehistoric mist teaches us a profound lesson about the complexity of the ancient world. It shatters our preconceived notions of what a monster truly is. A giant claw does not necessarily belong to a predator. A creature that looks like a monster is not always a hunter. We realize that the most extreme adaptations in nature are not always born from a desire to kill, but from a desperate, uncompromising will to live. Sometimes the most frightening appearance is simply a survival strategy. As the Tarbosaurus fades back into the dense undergrowth and the Therizinosaurus slowly lowers its massive arms to resume its peaceful grazing among the high branches, we are left to ponder the endless creativity of evolution. But this paradox opens the door to an even greater question. If a slow-moving, plant-eating creature could already possess such incredible weapons and sophisticated psychological defenses, then how far had the true predators of that era evolved to counter such challenges? After discovering that a creature does not need to be gigantic to become a threat, we continue into a new and more frightening chapter of dinosaur history. If towering size and immense bite force could be deterred by a simple display of living blades, nature had to find a completely different blueprint for the perfect assassin. A blueprint that discarded massive bulk entirely, trading brute strength for something far more terrifying. A new kind of hunter was rising in the shadows, one that would redefine the very mechanics of prehistoric danger by mastering the lethal geometry of speed, precision, and intelligence. As the heavy mist of the ancient forest slowly dissipates into the warming air, our journey takes us far away from the domain of the lumbering giants and into a drastically different landscape. Imagine leaving the dense, humid woodlands behind and stepping onto the vast, arid plains and sweeping sand dunes of prehistoric Asia. The wind here carries the fine dust of an ancient desert, whispering through sparse patches of resilient scrub brush and baking under a relentless, unblinking sun. In this sun-drenched, open environment, sheer size is no longer an impenetrable shield, and raw brute force is heavily penalized by the scorching heat. A massive creature in this terrain would struggle to hide and would require impossible amounts of water and calories to survive the harsh conditions. To conquer this arid wilderness, the architecture of predation had to undergo a radical, almost unthinkable transformation. Revolution had to discard the blueprints of the colossal titans and draft a masterpiece of biological miniaturization. We are entering the domain of a lineage that would completely rewrite the rules of prehistoric survival. These were the Raptor family, a group of dinosaurs that changed the way we view danger. For decades, popular culture has painted a very specific, deeply terrifying picture of these creatures in our collective imagination. The name Velociraptor has long become a symbol of intelligent, agile, and ruthless predators. When we close our eyes and hear that name, we instinctively envision monstrous, scaly beasts towering over a grown human, capable of tearing through metal and overpowering us with terrifying ease. We picture a giant monster, capable of easily overpowering humans like in films. But when we carefully brush away the ancient desert sands from the fossilized remains, the bones reveal a story that is vastly different from Hollywood mythology. The truth recorded in the stone is a profound lesson in evolutionary efficiency. But the truth is even more astonishing than what movies have shown. Velociraptor was actually much smaller. If you were to stand face to face with a living, breathing Velociraptor, you would not be looking up into the eyes of a towering cinematic nightmare. Instead, you would be looking down at a creature whose physical volume was remarkably modest. Its true size was only comparable to that of a large turkey. At first glance, a predator of such a diminutive stature might seem insignificant, almost completely non-threatening compared to the multi-ton carnivores that prowled other parts of the globe. How could something so small be considered one of the most perfectly engineered assassins of the ancient world? The answer lies in the fundamental physics of motion and the intricate biology of scaling. In the relentless theater of survival, carrying excess mass is a severe liability. But that small size was exactly what made it a deadly advantage. To understand the genius of this miniaturization, we must consider the mechanical laws that govern all living bodies. When an animal possesses a massive, heavy frame, every sudden movement, every change in direction, and every burst of acceleration requires an enormous expenditure of muscular energy to overcome the forces of inertia. A giant predator is essentially a biological freight train. It takes a tremendous amount of time to reach its top speed, and it requires significant distance to slow down or turn. But in nature, a lighter body means greater speed, faster movement, and more precise reactions. By shrinking the body down to the size of a large modern bird, evolution created a creature that existed in a state of hyper-agility. Velociraptor did not need absolute strength. It needed precision. Let us delve into the complex anatomy that made this precision possible. Fossils show that this species possessed a body structure optimized for hunting. Every single bone in its skeleton was sculpted by the pressures of its environment to eliminate unnecessary weight while maximizing structural integrity. Their bones were likely hollow, similar to those of modern soaring birds, featuring thin, incredibly strong outer walls supported by a complex internal network of bony struts. This avian-like skeletal architecture made the creature breathtakingly light, allowing it to defy gravity with almost effortless grace. This lightweight frame was propelled by an extraordinary locomotive system. Its powerful legs allowed it to accelerate quickly. The muscles of the hind limbs were anchored to an elongated, highly specialized pelvic bone, providing extreme leverage for explosive bursts of kinetic energy. When a velociraptor decided to move, it did not lumber or build momentum slowly. It vanished in a blur of dust and motion. Furthermore, a long, incredibly stiff tail acted as a dynamic counterbalance, functioning much like the balancing pole of a tightrope walker. This structural marvel allowed the creature to execute razor-sharp turns at high velocities without tumbling over, maintaining perfect equilibrium as it navigated the uneven desert terrain in pursuit of fleeing prey. Yet, as magnificent as its physical engineering was, the most terrifying weapon this creature wielded was not forged from bone, tendon, or muscle. The true masterpiece of the velociraptor was locked securely away inside its skull. The defining characteristic that elevated this small predator above the ranks of ordinary carnivores lay not in the way it moved, but in the way it thought. To survive in a harsh, resource-scarce environment where every meal required a massive expenditure of energy, Instinct alone was no longer sufficient. A predator had to process complex environmental data, analyze variables, and predict the future movements of its targets. Compared to many other dinosaurs of the same era, the raptor group had more developed brains. When paleontologists examine the fossilized brain cases of these creatures, they utilize a measurement known as the encephalization quotient, which compares the actual size of the brain to the expected brain size based on the animal's total body mass. The cranial cavities of the raptor family reveal an astonishing amount of space dedicated to the brain, indicating a level of cognitive processing power that was exceptionally rare in the Mesozoic era. This highly developed neural network was a costly evolutionary investment. Brain tissue consumes a disproportionate amount of a body's daily caloric intake. For nature to authorize such a massive expenditure of energy on intelligence, the return on investment had to be the absolute guarantee of hunting success. This suggests that they may have possessed the ability to observe, react, and adapt faster in a highly competitive environment. Imagine this small, feathered assassin resting silently in the sand dune, its warm breath barely disturbing the dust. It is not simply resting, it is watching. Its large, forward-facing eyes, highly adapted to gather light and perceive intricate depth, scan the horizon with cold, calculating intent. It takes in the direction of the wind to ensure its scent is carried away from potential prey. It analyzes the specific gait of a distant herbivore, noting a slight limp that signals weakness. It surveys the terrain, memorizing the locations of rocks and depressions that could serve as cover. This is the hallmark of a cognitively advanced hunter. A simple predator would only rush forward to attack, while an intelligent predator would know when to wait, when to approach, and when to deliver the final strike. The velociraptor represents a profound philosophical shift in the history of life on Earth. It teaches us that nature does not solely rely on the blunt instruments of overwhelming size and crushing bite force to engineer the perfect survivor. By crafting a creature that was remarkably small, exceptionally fast, and unnervingly intelligent, evolution proved that a brilliantly orchestrated strategy could easily outmaneuver raw power. As the harsh desert sun begins to dip below the horizon, casting long, shifting shadows across the ancient sands, the true terror of this landscape is not a roaring giant shaking the earth, but a small, silent intelligence waiting patiently in the dark, calculating the exact millisecond to unleash a masterpiece of biological precision. While the remarkable intelligence of these compact predators elevated them to a league of their own, their cognitive superiority was ultimately delivered through a marvel of biological engineering. To fully appreciate the lethal perfection of this lineage, we must examine the physical instrument that translated their calculating thoughts into devastating reality. The fossilized footprints of these creatures reveal a fascinating detail about the way they moved across the ancient Earth. Unlike most dinosaurs that walked flatly on 3 forward-facing toes, these predators walked exclusively on 2. The innermost toe of each hind foot was held permanently aloft, retracted tightly against the foot as they traveled. Nature had isolated this digit for a singular, terrifying purpose, keeping it elevated to ensure the tip never touched the abrasive ground, thereby preserving a razor-sharp point that could rival modern surgical steel. When we closely analyze the bone structure of this specialized digit, we discover a masterpiece of predatory biomechanics. This was not a simple, straight talon designed for scratching. It was a highly pronounced, deeply curved structure. Fossils show that this species possessed a body structure optimized for hunting, and at the core of this optimization were its curved, sickle-shaped claws that could lock onto prey, hold onto the victim's body, and create deep wounds. In life, this bony core was sheathed in a dense, hardened layer of keratin, extending its length and refining its inner edge to a dangerous thinness. The joint connecting this toe to the foot was uniquely constructed, functioning much like a heavy-duty pivot. Powerful ligaments and thick bands of muscle were anchored to the base of the bone, acting like tightly wound springs. When the predator struck, these muscles would contract with explosive force, snapping the sickle claw downward and inward in a blindingly fast, mechanically unstoppable arc. However, a fundamental misunderstanding has long plagued our perception of this weapon. For many years, it was assumed that these dinosaurs used their claws to slash and disembowel their prey with sweeping kicks, much like a sword cutting through the air. But biomechanical testing of the claw's structural geometry reveals a different, far more sinister function. The inner curve of the claw was not perfectly suited for long, slicing motions through tough hide. Instead, it was engineered to puncture and hook. The true function of this sickle claw was to act as a biological anchor. When the predator leaped onto the back or the flank of a struggling victim, it would drive these curved spikes deep into the flesh. Because of the extreme curvature, the downward pull of gravity and the violent thrashing of the prey would only force the claws to embed themselves even deeper. It was a mechanism designed to grapple, allowing the lightweight predator to secure itself onto a much larger moving target, transforming the hunter into a deadly, unshakable parasite that would methodically dismantle its prey while clinging tightly to its side. This terrifying formula of a lightweight, intelligent body armed with biological grappling hooks was undeniably successful. But evolution is a relentless experimenter, constantly pushing the boundaries of what a successful design can achieve. If a small, agile predator could bring down prey larger than itself using this method, what would happen if nature applied this exact same biomechanical blueprint to a massive frame? However, if Velociraptor was a compact assassin, then its larger relatives transformed that formula into a true nightmare. We must travel to the vast forested floodplains of what is now North America during the early Cretaceous period. Here, the ground trembled under the footsteps of a creature that defied the conventional limits of agility and mass. This was Utahraptor. To stand in the shadow of this magnificent beast is to witness the absolute pinnacle of predatory terror. Unlike its smaller relative, Utahraptor possessed an astonishing size. It discarded the turkey-sized dimensions of its desert-dwelling cousins and scaled the architecture of the sickle-clawed hunter up to monstrous proportions. With a length that could reach around 5 to 7 meters and a weight close to 1 ton, it combined the power of a large predator with the speed and agility of the raptor group. Imagine a creature the size of a modern heavy-duty pickup truck, yet possessing the nervous system, the rapid twitch muscle fibers, and the elevated cognitive processing of a hyper-agile pursuit predator. The sheer physical presence of a 1-ton animal is usually associated with slow, lumbering movements. But the Utahraptor shattered this rule. It retained the hollow bone structure and the stiffened balancing tail of its lineage, allowing it to navigate the dense floodplains with a terrifying, silent grace. When it broke from the cover of the ancient cycad groves, it did not charge with the slow, building momentum of a typical giant. It exploded into motion, closing the distance between itself and its target with a terrifyingly rapid, ground-eating stride. The most chilling aspect of the Utahraptor was the scaled-up version of the family's signature weapon. The elevated second toe on each of its hind feet bore a gigantic, keratin-sheathed spike that defied belief. A massive curved sickle claw on its hind foot was not only used for attacking, but could also penetrate deep into the prey's body. These claws could reach up to 24 centimeters in length. They were essentially organic meat hooks, driven by the hydraulic power of legs thick with heavy musculature. When a creature of this size utilized such a specialized weapon, The physics of the attack became incredibly brutal. The Utah raptor did not need to rely on the protracted, clinging bites that smaller predators use to wear their prey down. It used its immense body weight and explosive leg strength to drive the massive sickle claws into the spine, hips, or flanks of large herbivores. Lock the victim in place and leave them helpless. Once those colossal, deeply curved hooks penetrated the thick hide and anchored into the heavy muscle or bone underneath, the mechanical advantage belonged entirely to the predator. The agonizing pain and the incredible physical weight of the one-ton hunter bearing down on those anchor points would immediately paralyze the prey with shock and structural failure. Once that claw had latched on, escape was almost impossible. In the quiet aftermath of such an encounter, as the dust settled over the prehistoric floodplain, the true significance of these creatures becomes clear. They represented a completely different path of evolution. They were the definitive proof that dominance in the ancient world did not require a creature to simply evolve heavier bones, thicker muscles, and a wider jaw. The raptor lineage chose a far more sophisticated route to the top of the food chain, optimizing the lethal geometry of their bodies and refining the computational power of their minds. They proved that the ultimate weapon was not becoming larger, but becoming smarter. And as we look deeper into the shadows of their ancient habitats, the fossil record hints that this heightened intelligence may have unlocked a completely new dimension of terror, a strategy that would turn the prehistoric forests into a theater of calculated, coordinated warfare. The realization that the prehistoric world harbored predators with highly developed cognitive processing capabilities naturally leads us to a fascinating threshold in our understanding of animal behavior. This opened the door to an even greater mystery. We are forced to consider the profound implications of intelligence in the wild. A highly developed brain in a solitary creature is certainly a formidable tool, allowing for calculated ambushes and precise strikes. But a far more chilling prospect emerges when we wonder about the social dynamics of these ancient landscapes. Did these assassins only hunt alone, or did they know how to cooperate with each other? For many years, the silent stones held their secrets tightly, offering only fragmented glimpses of isolated hunters scattered across the globe. Paleontology often relies on the solitary skeleton to tell a story, but occasionally, the Earth reveals a tragic and complex tapestry of life and death frozen in a single moment. When researchers meticulously excavate certain fossil beds, they sometimes uncover something that defies the image of a lonely, wandering killer. They find the remains of a single, massive herbivore, surrounded by the scattered, intermingled teeth and bones of multiple predatory dinosaurs of the same species. While scavenging is always a possibility, the specific arrangement of these bone beds, combined with rare preserved trackways showing multiple individuals moving in deliberate, synchronized patterns, paints a completely different picture. Some evidence from fossils has led scientists to suggest that certain raptor species may have once operated in groups, sharing roles while chasing prey. This concept of shared roles fundamentally shifts the balance of power in the prehistoric ecosystem. It implies a level of social organization, communication, and impulse control that we typically associate with modern wolves or lions, transposed onto a deeply ancient reptilian avian lineage. To visualize the terrifying efficiency of this coordinated warfare, imagine a vast, sprawling floodplain during the early morning hours. A thick, silvery mist clings to the damp earth, concealing the dense underbrush of ferns and cycads. In the center of this clearing, a herd of medium-sized herbivores is peacefully grazing, pulling the tough vegetation from the earth with dull, grinding teeth. These creatures are constantly on high alert, their eyes scanning the tree line and their ears twitching at the slightest snap of a twig. For a solitary predator, approaching this many watchful eyes would be nearly impossible. But the unseen hunters lurking in the shadows are not operating alone. Their targets may not have been the largest creatures, but prey that was large enough to provide energy. A fully grown sauropod might be too massive and dangerous to risk attacking. But the ecosystem offered plenty of alternative sustenance. Small and medium-sized herbivores, such as smaller theropods, young horned dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus, or weak, old, and injured individuals could have become ideal targets. The pack, hidden deep within the foliage, begins to evaluate the herd. This requires a profound level of collective restraint. They do not simply charge blindly into the open, driven by mindless hunger. Instead of rushing into a chaotic attack, a group of raptors may have used surrounding tactics. Through subtle vocalizations, precise body language, or even slight shifts in feather displays, the group communicates a complex tactical plan. The pack divides, functioning as a single, distributed organism with a unified objective. The geometry of the ambush is meticulously established before a single footstep falls onto the open ground. Suddenly, the silence of the morning is shattered. But the strike does not come from all sides at once. Some individuals moved ahead to apply pressure, forcing the prey to change its direction, while others moved around the sides to cut off escape routes. The individuals breaking cover first are not necessarily trying to secure a kill. Their role is to act as drivers, creating a wave of panic that ripples through the grazing herd. As the heavy herbivores bellow in fear and begin to stampede, their natural instinct is to flee in a straight line away from the immediate threat. But the drivers expertly maneuver, lunging and snapping, steering the frightened animals precisely toward the concealed flanks where the rest of the pack lies in absolute stillness, waiting for the perfect moment. The psychological and physical toll on the targeted prey is immense. As a young or injured Tyrannosaurus is separated from the protective mass of its herd, it finds itself running a terrifying gauntlet. Every time it attempts to veer toward the safety of the dense forest, a new predator materializes from the brush, snapping its jaws and forcing the exhausted creature back into the open. The hunt becomes a meticulously calculated game of endurance. The predators are lightly built and highly oxygenated, designed for sustained, agile movement. The heavy herbivore is not. As lactic acid floods its heavy muscles and its breathing becomes desperate and ragged, panic completely overtakes its senses. When the prey began to tire, lose direction, or become separated from the group, they would finally launch their attack. The culmination of the hunt is a masterpiece of biological coordination. The pack converges simultaneously. The hunters launch themselves through the air, utilizing their powerful hind legs to leap onto the flanks and back of the staggering giant. This is the moment the specialized anatomy we explored earlier reveals its true, terrifying purpose in a group setting. The sickle claw on their hind feet was not only used to cause injuries, but also helped them hold tightly onto the prey's body, keeping the victim helpless while other individuals continued attacking. As one raptor anchors itself securely, using its entire body weight to drag the victim downward, another targets the vulnerable neck, and yet another slashes at the heavy tendons of the legs. The massive herbivore is immobilized, not by a single crushing bite, but by a suffocating blanket of perfectly synchronized, localized trauma. This cooperative strategy fundamentally redefines the concept of a biological weapon. What made this strategy terrifying was that each individual did not need to be the strongest. By pooling their physical resources and synchronizing their actions, a pack of relatively small dinosaurs could routinely conquer animals many times their own size and weight. A single raptor might fail, but an entire group became a collective hunting brain. This collective brain was capable of processing complex spatial data, adapting to the unpredictable movements of the prey and executing a unified strategy with lethal precision. It is a haunting realization that millions of years before humans ever walked the earth, the forests were stalked by networks of interconnected minds, working in perfect, deadly harmony. The evolutionary journey of the dinosaurs is a vast, branching tree of breathtaking innovation. In the millions of years long race for survival, every dinosaur species discovered its own path to becoming a dominant force. While some lineages invested entirely in the accumulation of sheer bodily mass or the development of impenetrable armor, others found a completely different avenue to power. Some transformed their brains into weapons, using strategy and numbers to overpower prey. By mastering the intricate art of cooperation, they proved that intelligence and social structure could be far more devastating than any physical claw or tooth. Yet the story of prehistoric predation is far from complete. As we look backward into an even older chapter of the ancient world, we discover a time before the complex, whispering packs emerged. A time when a solitary hunter ruled the landscape, not with strategy and numbers, but by transforming its very skeleton into a relentless instrument of destruction. Let us drift further backward through the deep, quiet corridors of prehistoric time, leaving behind the cunning, coordinated packs of the sun-baked Cretaceous plains to arrive at a vastly different epoch. In the endless race for dominance, while some lineages invested entirely in the development of complex cognitive networks and social structures, others took a radically distinct evolutionary route. But others chose a different direction, turning their own bodies into instruments of destruction. We are journeying into an era where the atmosphere was thick, heavy with moisture, and fragrant with the rich, earthy scent of ancient vegetation. Because before hunting groups like raptors appeared, another world had existed where giant predators roamed through the forests of the Jurassic period. These solitary wanderers operated on a completely different set of biological principles. They did not need complex cooperation or long pursuits. Instead, they relied on anatomical marvels so specialized, so perfectly honed by the harsh demands of their environment, that their very skeletons functioned as bespoke tools of execution. And one of the most iconic predators representing this style of evolution was Allosaurus, a creature that transformed its own skull into a living weapon. Close your eyes and visualize the landscape more than 150 million years ago, when Earth was a world of massive forests and creatures unlike anything seen in history. The continents were arranged differently, and the globe was wrapped in a lush, unbroken blanket of green. Towering conifers, monkey puzzle trees, and ancient ginkgos formed a dense, overlapping canopy that cast the forest floor into a permanent, dappled twilight. Below, a sprawling carpet of giant ferns and mosses absorbed the heavy footsteps of the most colossal animals to ever exist. This was the age when giant dinosaurs roamed the land, and life was constantly shaped by an endless battle for survival. The peaceful, grazing sauropods of this time were true mountains of flesh, possessing long, sweeping necks and whip-like tails that could break the sound barrier. To hunt in such a realm, surrounded by animals that weighed tens of thousands of pounds, required an apex predator of extraordinary design. In that world, one of the most terrifying predators emerged. If you were to encounter this solitary hunter, standing motionless in the shadows of the Jurassic tree line, you would immediately sense a lethal grace. It was a creature balanced perfectly on two powerful hind legs, possessing strong three-fingered arms armed with sharp claws. Yet, despite its imposing stature, it was not the absolute heaviest carnivore to ever exist. It was not the largest creature, nor did it possess the strongest bite. But it had something that made it a nightmare of the Jurassic period. It possessed a specialized piece of biological engineering that circumvented the need for brute crushing power. A living axe created from its own skull, that creature was Allosaurus. To truly comprehend the genius of this evolutionary adaptation, we must unlearn our modern assumptions about how large carnivores operate. When people think of dangerous predators, they often imagine creatures with enormous jaws capable of crushing their prey. We are heavily influenced by the hunting styles of modern mammalian predators, like lions, tigers, or wolves, and even later dinosaurs like the Tyrannosaurus rex. These animals typically leap onto their victims, clamp their heavily reinforced jaws around a vital area like the throat or spine, and use immense crushing pressure to quickly extinguish life. This method requires a massively thick, heavy skull, deeply rooted teeth designed to withstand extreme torsion, and bulging jaw muscles that can exert thousands of pounds of force. But Allosaurus chose a different path. With a body measuring around 8 to 10 meters long, a large head, and curved, razor-sharp teeth, it did not kill its prey through absolute bite force. When paleontologists carefully examine the fossilized skull of an Allosaurus, they uncover a fascinating structural secret. The skull is surprisingly light and airy. It is constructed with several large, hollow openings known as fenestrae. These natural windows in the bones significantly reduced the overall weight of the massive head, while maintaining a rigid, scaffold-like structural integrity. The jawbones themselves were relatively slender. This delicate, lightweight cranial architecture meant that if an Allosaurus attempted to bite down hard onto the thick, heavy bones of a struggling multi-ton sauropod and hold on, the sheer twisting forces of the struggling prey would likely fracture or shatter the predator's own jaws. Evolution had not equipped this hunter for a prolonged, bone-crushing wrestling match. Instead, it transformed its skull into a biological axe. The mechanics of this living weapon are a masterpiece of predatory physics. The true power of the Allosaurus did not originate in the muscles that closed its jaw, but rather in the incredibly robust muscles of its thick, heavy neck. The articulation of its jaw joints allowed for an astonishingly wide gape, an incredibly wide opening that would expose an entire terrifying array of weaponry. Allosaurus could open its jaws wide, drive its head downward, and use the power of its neck muscles to create deep wounds, causing its prey to bleed and weaken over time instead of being killed instantly. Imagine this predator launching its ambush. It would burst from the cover of the dense ferns, accelerating with terrifying speed on its long legs. As it closed the distance, it did not reach out to bite in a conventional manner. It pulled its large, lightweight head back, opened its jaws to an unnatural, horrifying angle, and then swung its entire upper jaw downward with tremendous velocity and force, powered entirely by those thick neck muscles acting like the heavy wooden handle of a lumberjack's tool. The teeth lining the upper jaw were the perfect blades for this biological hatchet. They were relatively thin, curved sharply backward, and featured microscopic serrations along both edges, functioning exactly like highly specialized steak knives. When the upper jaw slammed into the flank of a victim, the predator would instantly pull its head backward and upward, drawing those serrated blades violently through the hide, fat, and muscle tissue. It was a hit-and-run tactic of devastating efficiency. The strike was designed to slice cleanly through soft tissue without ever getting lodged in the dense bone beneath. The Allosaurus would deliver this devastating, tearing blow and immediately retreat to a safe distance, vanishing back into the protective shadows of the ancient forest before the massive, lumbering prey could realize what had happened and retaliate with a lethal tail whip or a crushing stomp. In the late Jurassic ecosystem, where massive sauropods existed, hunting large prey was an extremely dangerous challenge. The immense herbivores of this era, equipped with sheer bulk and powerful defensive instincts, could easily crush a lightly built predator that lingered too long in striking range. Engaging them in a direct, protracted physical confrontation would have been evolutionary suicide. The biological axe was nature's brilliant solution to this overwhelming size disparity. The Allosaurus did not need to conquer a 30-ton dinosaur in a matter of desperate, violent seconds. It only needed to inflict a series of severe lacerations. Once the deep, bleeding wounds were opened, the predator's dangerous physical work was largely finished. What followed was a chilling display of predatory patience. The hunter would simply track the bleeding, panicking giant from a safe distance, a silent, invisible shadow moving quietly through the humid mist. The pursuit could last for hours or even days. As the immense herbivore continuously lost blood, a profound exhaustion would slowly take hold. Its massive heart would struggle to pump fading life through its immense, towering frame. Its heavy legs would grow weak, and its movements would become sluggish and confused. The Allosaurus, highly adapted for endurance and low-energy tracking, would wait calmly in the periphery of its victim's fading vision. Only when the great creature finally succumbed to the massive blood loss and collapsed heavily onto the fern-covered forest floor would the patient hunter finally step out of the shadows to claim its long-awaited prize. This hauntingly methodical and efficient method of execution perfectly illustrates how evolution crafts unique, specialized tools for specific environmental challenges, proving that the most terrifying predators are not always the ones that crush you immediately, but the ones that strike a single, perfect blow and patiently wait for time to do the rest. As we trace the lineage of prehistoric assassins through the deep corridors of geological time, we learn a profound truth about the relentless engine of evolution. The biological axe of the solitary Jurassic hunter was a masterpiece of its era, a perfect solution to a specific set of environmental challenges. But the race for survival never stopped at how terrifying a predator's weapons could become. The ancient world was never static. It was a dynamic, endlessly shifting theater of life, where stagnation meant extinction. In the dinosaur world, every new advantage that appeared forced others to adapt. The herbivores grew larger, their skins grew thicker, and their defensive instincts became sharper. Consequently, the predators had to answer these upgrades with innovations of their own. Sharper teeth, stronger bites, or more effective ways of attacking could all shift the balance between predator and prey. To witness the next monumental leap in this predatory arms race, we must travel forward in time to the sweeping, arid floodplains of what is now modern-day Patagonia, South America, during the late Cretaceous period. The landscape here was vast and unforgiving, characterized by intense seasonal changes, sprawling forests of towering conifers, and open, dusty plains baked by a relentless sun. In this extreme environment, herbivores had evolved to truly staggering proportions, pushing the absolute biological limits of terrestrial gigantism. To bring down these walking mountains, the solitary ambush tactics of the past were no longer mathematically viable. At another point in Earth's history, a group of carnivorous dinosaurs took that strategy to a whole new level. Evolution realized that to conquer a giant, the hunters had to combine their strength. They did not only hunt with their teeth and claws, but through the coordination of an entire group. Stepping out from the thermal haze of the prehistoric plains is a creature of awe-inspiring proportions. This was Mesozoic, a predator compared to a giant warrior of the Cretaceous period, with a length that could exceed 10 meters, a body weighing several tons, and jaws filled with blade-like teeth. When paleontologists unearthed the first fossilized remains of this colossal theropod, they were astounded by its sheer physical volume. Mesozoic was one of the largest carnivorous dinosaurs to ever exist. Its heavily built skull was armed with flattened, highly serrated teeth designed specifically for slicing through thick hide and dense muscle without becoming lodged in the heavy bones beneath. Its thick, muscular legs were built for sustained, powerful strides, carrying its massive bulk across the vast South American plains. Its appearance alone was enough to make any creature in the ancient world cautious. However, a critical biological reality dictates the rules of engagement for creatures of this magnitude. In nature, a lone predator, no matter how powerful, still has limits because it only has one body to attack with. Even a 10-meter-long apex predator is bound by the constraints of its own stamina, oxygen capacity, and physical vulnerability. If a solitary hunter makes a mistake, it has no backup. If it suffers an injury, it cannot secure its next meal. Furthermore, a lone hunter is fighting against the clock, possessing only a limited amount of time before the prey escapes. A single Mesozoic was already dangerous with its enormous size, sharp teeth, and overwhelming strength. But size was not what made Mesozoic truly terrifying. The secret lay in the way it hunted. When this massive creature operated as part of a collective, the entire dynamic of the prehistoric food chain was violently disrupted. But a group of them could create a much greater threat. To understand the absolute necessity of this pack behavior, we must cast our gaze upon the prey that shared their environment. Imagine the ground vibrating rhythmically beneath your feet, accompanied by the deep, resonant sound of air being forced through immense respiratory systems. Emerging from the dust is a Tyrannosaur, a long-necked sauropod of truly incomprehensible scale. A giant sauropod weighing nearly 80 tons could make any predator hesitate. This creature is essentially a living, breathing geological feature. Its legs are like the pillars of an ancient temple, supporting a barrel-shaped chest that could house a modern vehicle. Its tail, a massive column of muscle and bone, could be swung with enough kinetic energy to instantly shatter the femur or crush the ribcage of any attacker. For a solitary carnivore, attempting to kill an 80-ton animal is an act of sheer evolutionary suicide. The sheer mass and defensive capabilities of the Tyrannosaur make a quick, fatal bite impossible. But when multiple predators cooperate, the hunt is no longer a simple confrontation. The pack transforms a seemingly impossible physical challenge into a calculated, strategic operation. It becomes a battle with a clear strategy. Surrounding, applying pressure, and attacking from multiple directions. But for a group of Mesozoic, enormous size did not mean being unbeatable. The intelligence required to execute this type of hunt is profoundly complex. The pack, perhaps composed of individuals of varying ages and sizes, approaches the towering Tyrannosaur with chilling patience. They do not charge blindly into the crushing range of the giant's feet. Instead of rushing into a direct attack, they may have used an exhaustion strategy. This method of hunting is a grueling, horrifying war of attrition. The pack spreads out, forming a wide, loose perimeter around the lumbering giant. They communicate through low-frequency rumbles, subtle shifts in posture, and visual cues, coordinating their movements perfectly in the dusty haze. Then, the grim work begins. Some individuals would repeatedly move closer, biting into softer areas of flesh to create wounds, then quickly retreat before the long neck or massive tail could strike back. These are not killing bites. They are tactical strikes designed to bleed the giant and induce panic. The Mesozoic uses its blade-like teeth to carve out a massive chunk of flesh from the sauropod's thick thighs or flanks, instantly utilizing its powerful legs to dart backward, narrowly avoiding the devastating supersonic whip of the Tyrannosaur's tail. As the massive herbivore bellows in pain and frustration, it instinctively pivots its mountain-like body to face its attacker, preparing to defend itself with a crushing stomp. But this is exactly what the pack anticipates. When the prey turned to defend itself, other individuals would approach from another direction. The moment the Tyrannosaur focuses its attention on one flank, a second and third Mapusaurus step out from the dust on the opposite side, delivering their own brutal, slicing bites before melting back into the periphery. The giant is trapped in a terrifying, dizzying cycle of pain and disorientation. There is no safe direction. There is no escape from the relentless pressure. This agonizing process defies our modern expectation of a swift predator-prey encounter. The hunt did not end within a few minutes, but became a prolonged struggle. This macabre dance could last for hours, dragging on under the sweltering heat of the Cretaceous sun. The pack is perfectly adapted to outlast their massive target. They take turns resting in the shadows, conserving their energy while other members of the group maintain the perimeter and continue the harassment. Each bite caused the sauropod to lose more energy, move slower, and become less capable of protecting itself. The Tyrannosaur, despite its incredible volume of blood and immense reserves of energy, is bleeding from dozens of deep lacerations. The sheer effort of constantly pivoting its 80-ton frame, combined with the rising panic and catastrophic blood loss, causes its massive heart to strain and its heavy, pillar-like legs to tremble. Eventually, biology demands its toll. The immense titan, unable to swat away the swarm of 10-meter-long predators, slowly begins to buckle. After repeated attacks, even a creature weighing tens of tons could become exhausted against the persistence of an entire hunting group. When the majestic giant finally collapses, sending a massive plume of dust into the air and shaking the earth one final time, the pack quietly converges to claim the monumental feast they have so patiently engineered. The story of the Mapusaurus pack is a chilling testament to the power of social behavior in the ancient world. Scientists believe that Mapusaurus may have hunted in groups based on fossil evidence that has been discovered. In a remarkable fossil bed in Patagonia, paleontologists unearthed the remains of at least 7 Mapusaurus individuals of different ages and sizes, all buried together in a single location, suggesting they lived, moved, and died as a cohesive social unit. However, scientists still cannot confirm with certainty whether they truly coordinated like modern predators, because fossils are only the remaining pieces of a world that disappeared millions of years ago. We cannot observe their behaviors, hear their calls, or watch their intricate hunting dances. Yet, the physical evidence left behind in the stone strongly suggests that millions of years before wolves ran through the snow or lions stalked the savanna, the giant theropods of the Cretaceous had already mastered the deadly, beautiful art of collective warfare, pushing the evolution of predation to its absolute, terrifying zenith. When species like Mapusaurus began turning cooperation into a terrifying weapon, the creatures being hunted were also forced to evolve in order to survive. The arms race of the prehistoric world was a relentless, beautifully complex mechanism where every offensive innovation was eventually met with a defensive masterpiece. In an environment where the shadows were filled with intelligent packs and solitary giants armed with biological axes, the gentle herbivores faced an absolute evolutionary ultimatum. They could no longer rely only on running away, but had to find ways to fight back using their own bodies. Running required vast amounts of energy, and against a coordinated pack designed to exhaust its target, flight was simply a delayed sentence of death. Therefore, biology engineered a radical paradigm shift in the architecture of the hunted. From that moment, the dinosaur world entered a new battle where not only predators became more dangerous, but prey also gradually transformed into warriors capable of facing the most terrifying assassins. Let us wander into a sun-drenched clearing of the late Cretaceous period, where the air is thick with the scent of crushed ferns and damp earth. After millions of years of evolution, the dinosaur world became a massive arena where every creature had to find its own way to survive. We have seen how predators constantly develop new weapons for killing. We have witnessed the terrifying efficiency of speed, claws, coordinated strategies to jaws capable of tearing prey apart. But in this battle for survival, there was a truth few expected. The traditional narrative of the helpless, gentle leaf eater, destined only to be consumed, is a profound underestimation of nature's resilience. Prey did not simply run away, they evolved as well. And sometimes, the hunted creatures became monsters that forced even predators to hesitate. Imagine a creature grazing slowly by the edge of a winding prehistoric river. Its profile is low to the ground, incredibly wide, and astonishingly dense. One of the most astonishing examples was Allosaurus. If a predator burst from the tree line with the intent to kill, this magnificent beast possessed a completely different behavioral response compared to the towering sauropods. It did not run, it fought back. To understand how it achieved this, we must examine the ultimate triumph of biological armor. Its body was covered with layers of hard, bony armor like a natural shield, creating a defense system that forced many predators to think twice before attacking. These were not just thickened scales, they were osteoderms, heavy plates of solid bone that grew directly within the skin. From its heavy eyelids to the base of its tail, the Allosaurus was a living, breathing tank. This interlocking mosaic of bone was arranged in rows, often featuring raised keels and sharp spikes that protected the vulnerable areas of the neck and shoulders. Underneath these bony plates lay a thick, fibrous layer of skin designed to absorb blunt force trauma, preventing the crushing pressure of a predator's bite from shattering the delicate ribs or internal organs beneath. If a massive carnivore attempted to sink its teeth into the back of an Allosaurus, it would be met with an impenetrable wall of solid calcium and keratin. The predator would risk shattering its own highly specialized teeth, completely neutralizing its primary weapon. By lowering its soft underbelly to the earth and tucking its armored head inward, the creature became an immovable fortress, securely anchored to the ground and virtually impossible to flip over. But what made it truly unique was not only its defensive ability. While the armor served as the ultimate shield, evolution also provided this creature with a devastatingly effective sword. At the end of its tail was a structure resembling a massive club made of bone, a weapon capable of delivering powerful strikes strong enough to seriously injure an attacker. This was not a simple lump of bone. The tail vertebrae leading up to the club were heavily modified, interlocking tightly to form a stiff, unyielding handle. Powerful, thick bands of muscle stretched along the hips and the base of the tail, acting like heavily wound torsion springs. When a predator approached too closely, testing the defenses of the armored shell, the Allosaurus would unleash the stored kinetic energy. The heavy bone club would swing through the air with terrifying velocity. This was a weapon governed by the unforgiving laws of physics. Mass multiplied by acceleration equaled a catastrophic impact. A strike to the lower legs of a towering predator could instantly shatter the thick femur or tibia, crippling the attacker and leaving it to slowly starve in the harsh, prehistoric wilderness. The Allosaurus did not need to hunt. It simply needed to ensure that any creature attempting to hunt it would face a profound, life-altering risk. However, Allosaurus was not the only defensive warrior of the ancient world. As we journey further across the vast, fern-covered plains of North America, we encounter another masterpiece of defensive engineering, one that utilized a completely different anatomical approach to survival. Standing amidst the low-lying vegetation is a creature of magnificent proportions, possessing a head that is arguably one of the most recognizable and heavily fortified structures in the history of terrestrial vertebrate biology. This was Triceratops, with 3 large horns on its head and an incredibly powerful skull. To stand in the presence of a fully grown Triceratops is to witness the perfect synthesis of immovable mass and forward-facing aggression. It was a creature that could weigh up to 9 tons, anchored by 4 thick pillar-like legs designed to support a chest cavity large enough to ferment immense quantities of tough, fibrous plants. Yet, despite its diet, Triceratops was not just a giant herbivore, but a warrior capable of facing the most dangerous predators of its era. Its head alone could account for nearly a third of its entire body length, a massive cantilevered structure attached to a heavily muscled neck via a highly specialized ball and socket joint, allowing it to rapidly pivot and track the movements of an approaching threat. The primary arsenal of this prehistoric warrior consisted of its spectacular facial adornments. Its 3 forward-facing horns could be used for stabbing, defense, or pushing back opponents. 2 colossal horns, each measuring over a meter long, protruded from just above its eyes, curving slightly forward to present lethal, unyielding points. A third, shorter horn rested firmly upon its snout. In life, these solid bone cores were encased in thick, constantly growing sheaths of keratin, making them even longer and sharper than the fossils suggest. When challenged, a Triceratops would lower its massive head, pointing these biological spears directly at the chest or stomach of an attacking predator. A sudden upward thrust from a 9-ton animal utilizing these deeply anchored horns could easily impale even the largest carnivores of the Cretaceous period. Complementing these offensive weapons was a magnificent defensive structure extending from the back of its head. Meanwhile, its massive skull frill at the back functioned like a protective shield, helping it withstand powerful attacks. This sweeping collar of solid bone stretched across the vulnerable neck and shoulders, effectively blocking the favored strike zones of massive predators. If a carnivore attempted a plunging bite from above, its teeth would scrape uselessly against the heavy bone of the frill. This shield was deeply laced with blood vessels, suggesting it may have also flushed with vibrant colors to intimidate rivals or attract mates. But in the heat of a life-or-death struggle, it served as an impenetrable barrier against the jaws of death. These living fortresses, the Allosaurus and the Triceratops, tell a profound story about the balance of power in the natural world. They prove that the prehistoric landscape was not merely a slaughterhouse ruled exclusively by the jaws of giant carnivores. It was a dynamic, fiercely contested battleground where every strategy of attack was countered by an equally brilliant strategy of defense. Yet the existence of such heavily fortified prey meant that the pressure on predators had reached an absolute zenith. To bring down a living tank or an impaling warrior, evolution would have to produce an assassin that possessed no flaws, a creature that gathered every lethal advantage into one perfect, terrifying design, leading us directly to the absolute pinnacle of prehistoric predation. The existence of heavily fortified prey wandering the prehistoric landscape like impenetrable living fortresses naturally dictated the rise of an absolute biological countermeasure. The intricate dance of survival dictates that an impenetrable shield will eventually force the creation of an unstoppable force. And the most incredible part was that these creatures could face one of the most famous assassins in history, Tyrannosaurus rex. The late Cretaceous landscape of North America was a theater of intense ecological pressure, vibrating with an evolutionary tension that had been building for millions of years. It was a clash between 2 animals that had evolved to perfection. Picture this heavy, humid world where towering conifers cast long, dramatic shadows across the fern-covered floodplains. In this arena, we witness the ultimate confrontation of biological engineering. one side possessing powerful jaws with enormous teeth and a hunting instinct built for killing, while the other had sharp horns, natural armor, and an unbreakable will to survive. When we observe this ancient rivalry, we are not simply looking at a contest of brute strength or a chaotic struggle for dominance. But what made this battle fascinating was not about who was stronger, but that both had evolved to counter each other. It was a magnificent, terrifying symmetry. Every advantage created a weakness, and every weapon created a new form of defense. The armored plates of the Allosaurus and the impaling horns of the Triceratops demanded a predator that could bypass or utterly destroy these defenses. In response to this immense challenge, nature synthesized the ultimate biological weapon. One name became a symbol of destruction. That was Tyrannosaurus rex, a predator famous not only for its size, but also possibly one of the most complete hunting evolutions ever created by nature. By the end of the Cretaceous period, one creature appeared and seemed to have reached the limits of evolutionary perfection. It was the grand culmination of predatory design, a masterclass in biomechanics that seamlessly blended terrifying mass with astonishing sensory precision. It was not only larger and stronger, but also possessed traits that made it one of the most terrifying predators ever to exist on Earth. That was Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king. To truly appreciate the magnificent architecture of this animal, we must look backward through the deep corridors of geological time and acknowledge the long lineage of hunters that came before. T-Rex was not the first carnivorous dinosaur, nor was it the only predator ruling its era. Before it, there were assassins like Allosaurus, Mesozoic, and predators from the Raptor group. We have seen the biological hatchet of the Jurassic, the exhausting pack tactics of the colossal South American titans, and the hyper-intelligent, sickle-clawed precision of the desert dwellers. But what made T-Rex different was that it did not seem to possess just one unique weapon. It possessed them all. Imagine feeling the deep, rhythmic thud of a heavy footstep reverberating through the damp soil. Through the dense curtain of ancient vegetation steps a creature of almost incomprehensible scale. With a length of around 12 to 13 meters, a height that could reach nearly 4 meters at the hips, T-Rex was a massive hunting machine. Its body was a marvel of structural engineering, perfectly balanced at the hips. A heavy, highly muscular tail extended backward, acting as a dynamic counterweight to the sheer, unbelievable mass of its colossal head. What made T-Rex a symbol of destruction was its optimization. Every single ounce of its multi-ton frame was dedicated to the pursuit, capture, and total dismantling of heavily armored prey. The focal point of this optimization, the absolute epicenter of its destructive power, was its skull. Unlike the lightweight, airy skulls of earlier predators designed for slashing, the skull of the Tyrannosaurus rex was heavily fused, thickened, and widened at the back to anchor an unimaginably vast network of jaw muscles. Its teeth were not only sharp enough to tear flesh, they were thick, powerful, and capable of enduring enormous forces. If you were to hold a fossilized tooth of this magnificent beast, you would not be holding a delicate, flattened blade. You would be holding a robust, heavily serrated cylinder, comparable in size and shape to a large banana. Its teeth, stretching dozens of centimeters long, had a structure resembling bone blades designed to pierce through skin, muscle, and even crush the bones of its prey. This structural integrity allowed for a feeding behavior that was incredibly rare in the dinosaur world. Unlike many predators that only attacked soft tissue, T-Rex could turn even bones into a source of food. The physics of its bite represent a pinnacle of terrestrial mechanics. When those massive jaws clamped down, driven by muscles that bulged with the width of a modern oil drum, the pressure exerted was catastrophic. Scientists estimate that the bite force of T-Rex was among the strongest of any known land animal. The heavy, deeply rooted teeth acted like armor-piercing spikes, driving cleanly through the thick, fibrous hide, bypassing the layers of fat and muscle and making direct, violent contact with the skeletal framework of its target. Each bite was not simply a wound. It was a strike capable of shattering bones, breaking the structure of the body. This allowed the tyrant king to extract precious, high-calorie marrow and completely neutralize the defensive capabilities of an armored opponent with a single, perfectly placed compression. However, a weapon of such overwhelming magnitude is entirely useless without a sophisticated guidance system. The true terror of this creature lay not just in the muscles of its jaw, but in the highly refined tissues housed within the thick bone of its brain case. T-Rex also possessed senses that made it a terrifying hunter. Its large skull contained a brain that was more developed than many other dinosaurs, allowing it to process information quickly. Paleontologists examining the cranial cavities have mapped out the intricate layout of its sensory centers, revealing a predator that experienced its world with terrifying clarity. The olfactory bulbs, the regions of the brain dedicated exclusively to processing smell, were absolutely massive. Its powerful sense of smell helped it detect traces from long distances. It could analyze the chemical composition of the wind, picking up the scent of decaying flesh, the pheromones of a rival, or the faint, metallic tang of blood from miles away across the sprawling floodplains. Complementing this chemical radar was a visual system that completely abandoned the standard design of its ancestors. The eyes of earlier theropods were positioned on the sides of their heads, offering a wide field of view but sacrificing depth perception. The skull of the Tyrannosaurus was radically pinched at the snout and widened at the back, rotating the orbital sockets to face directly forward. Its forward-facing eyes created the ability to see in depth, allowing it to judge distances more accurately. This stereoscopic vision allowed the predator to lock onto a target, calculate the exact trajectory of its lunging bite, and strike with the flawless precision of a guided missile. This magnificent synthesis of sensory awareness, cognitive processing, and bone-shattering physical power fundamentally elevated the creature's status within the ecosystem. This transformed T-Rex from a giant beast into a strategic predator. It was not a mindless brute stumbling through the forest, relying solely on random encounters. One that did not simply rely on strength, but knew how to use its strength. It could track a herd for days, analyze the defensive formations of a Triceratops group, calculate the optimal angle of attack to avoid the lethal horns, and execute a strike that maximized its crushing bite force while minimizing its own risk of injury. In the ancient forests and plains of the late Cretaceous period, T-Rex stood in a position with almost no rivals. It was the undisputed monarch of its domain, a biological masterpiece that dictated the flow of life and death across the continent. Giant herbivorous dinosaurs such as Triceratops and Hadrosaur species had to face a constant threat. The very shadow of the tyrant king was enough to shape the behavior, the migration patterns, and the ongoing evolution of every single creature that shared its world. Yet, as we stand in awe of this magnificent, unstoppable machine of destruction, observing the absolute zenith of prehistoric adaptation, a quiet, unsettling thought begins to form. We look at a creature that conquered everything the Earth could throw at it, a master of its incredibly complex biological reality. But the dominance of T-Rex also raised a major question. Was it truly the perfect predator? What happens to the flawless king of a specific world when the very foundations of that world are suddenly and violently erased? As we stand in the awe-inspiring shadow of the tyrant lizard king, marveling at a biological machine seemingly perfected for endless conquest, it is easy to succumb to the illusion of absolute invincibility. We imagine a world where the apex predator swept through the ancient forests without challenge, a sovereign ruler untouched by the brutal realities of the wild. But when we look closer at the silent stones resting in the quiet halls of our modern museums, a deeper, more poignant narrative emerges from the deep time. The fossils left behind after millions of years are not just petrified bones, but evidence that records some of the fiercest battles for survival in Earth's history. Paleontology is not merely the study of anatomy. It is the forensic reconstruction of ancient lives, and the bones often bear the violent, agonizing scars of a very different truth. When researchers place the colossal femurs, ribs, and skulls under the meticulous scrutiny of modern medical imaging, they do not find the pristine, unblemished frameworks of untouchable gods. Instead, they uncover a profound vulnerability. Scientists have discovered signs of injuries on the bones of many dinosaur individuals, including bite marks, broken bones, and evidence of healing. Imagine examining the heavy, reinforced rib cage of a fully grown Tyrannosaurus rex and discovering a massive, deep puncture wound that perfectly matches the dimensions of a Triceratops horn. A wound enveloped in a thick, knobby mass of calcified bone. This extensive regrowth indicates that the predator did not die immediately, but survived the catastrophic impalement, enduring months of agonizing pain and severe physical limitation as its body slowly knit the shattered bone back together. This shows that even the creatures at the top of the food chain were once injured, once defeated, and once forced to fight for survival. The prehistoric landscape was a theater of immense risk, where even the most heavily armed hunter could become a desperate patient in a matter of seconds. A miscalculated lunge, a sudden slip in the mud, or a perfectly timed defensive strike from a heavily armored herbivore could instantly turn the hunter into the hunted. Every bite mark, fracture, or sign of healing on bones reveals that dinosaurs were not unstoppable machines of destruction, but creatures that were once injured, defeated, and forced to fight in order to survive. They suffered from infections, debilitating arthritis, and the harsh, unforgiving degradation of old age. Fossil discoveries show that many species once faced each other directly, competing for territory, food, and dominance. The ecosystem was held in a delicate, incredibly tense balance, creating an ecosystem where no one was truly unbeatable. This revelation fundamentally alters our perception of the ancient world. It strips away the cinematic monster mythology and replaces it with a deeply complex, fragile, biological reality. This changes the way humans view dinosaurs. We begin to understand that survival in the Mesozoic era was a multi-dimensional puzzle. Danger did not only come from size or strength, but also from the ability to adapt, intelligence, and the way they used their environment. The giants ruled because they were perfectly synchronized with the specific environmental conditions of their time. They were the ultimate masters of a warm, humid, and highly stable greenhouse world that provided an endless abundance of caloric energy to fuel their massive bodies. But this extreme specialization, this total reliance on a specific climatic harmony, was also their greatest underlying weakness. However, after millions of years of dominance, a global disaster changed everything. Let us turn our gaze away from the dense, vibrant forests and look upward into the deep expanse of the prehistoric sky. Around 66 million years ago, a massive extinction event ended the reign of non-avian dinosaurs. It did not begin with a roar, but with a silent, blinding light traversing the vacuum of space. A world once dominated by giant creatures suddenly changed forever. A massive asteroid, estimated to be roughly 10 kilometers in diameter, traveling at an incomprehensible velocity of tens of thousands of miles per hour, entered the Earth's atmosphere. When it slammed into the shallow waters of what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, the sheer kinetic energy released was equivalent to billions of nuclear weapons detonating simultaneously. The impact instantly vaporized the ocean and the bedrock beneath it, blasting an unimaginable volume of pulverized rock, molten glass, and sulfur-rich compounds high into the upper atmosphere and out into the vacuum of space. When the in-Cretaceous disaster occurred, the asteroid impact changed the global environment, collapsed the food chain, and caused many dinosaur species to disappear. The immediate localized destruction was absolute, but the true terror of this event was atmospheric and global. As the ejected material rained back down upon the Earth, the friction of billions of glassy spherules re-entering the atmosphere heated the surrounding air to the temperature of a commercial oven. Massive, continent-spanning wildfires were ignited, turning the lush green world into a suffocating inferno of smoke and ash. A massive asteroid struck Earth, creating dust and toxic gases that covered the sky and changed the global climate. Following the fires, a profound and terrifying darkness descended upon the planet. The thick blanket of soot, pulverized rock, and sulfur dioxide aerosols effectively blocked the warmth and light of the sun. The global temperature plummeted in a matter of weeks, plunging a tropical greenhouse world into a sudden, deep freeze. In this chilling twilight, the foundation of the entire ecosystem began to unravel. Sunlight decreased, plants gradually died, food chains collapsed, and countless species disappeared. Without the sun, the massive, towering conifers and the sprawling fern prairies withered and died. For the gentle, mountain-sized herbivores that required hundreds of pounds of fresh vegetation every single day just to survive, the barren, frozen landscape offered nothing. As the great herds of Triceratops and Ankylosaurus slowly collapsed from starvation, the ripple effect traveled violently up the food chain. The mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, possessing the most powerful bite force in terrestrial history, suddenly found its magnificent biological weaponry completely useless. You cannot bite the cold. You cannot crush starvation. You cannot outthink a darkened sky. The highly specialized traits that made these creatures the undisputed masters of a warm, abundant world became the very anchors that dragged them into the abyss. This was considered the simplest explanation for the end of an era, a cosmic hammer blow that abruptly erased the titans of the Earth. Yet, as we reflect on the desolate, ash-covered plains of the post-impact world, a deeper scientific inquiry arises. Although many theories suggest that an asteroid was the main cause, the question still remains. Did the fall of the dinosaurs come from an external event, or did their dependence on a stable world prevent them from adapting? Evolution favors the specialized during times of extreme stability, allowing them to extract resources with unmatched efficiency. But when the rules of the environment change overnight, specialization becomes a fatal trap. In the end, the creatures that once ruled Earth did not disappear because they were weaker, but because the world around them changed too quickly. They were not biologically inferior. They were simply caught in an environment that their magnificent, towering anatomies were never designed to endure, leaving behind a haunting silence that would eventually give way to a spectacular new dawn. As the dust from the catastrophic impact settled, blanketing the scarred Earth in a freezing, suffocating twilight, it seemed as though the grand experiment of the dinosaur era had been completely erased. For many decades, humans believed that the extinction of dinosaurs was a complete ending. We pictured a barren, silent globe, devoid of the magnificent biological architecture that had ruled for over 160 million years. We imagined that the colossal bones buried in the ash were the final, tragic monuments of a failed dynasty. But fossils tell a more complex story. When we carefully sift through the delicate layers of sedimentary rock deposited immediately after the catastrophe, we do not find absolute biological silence. We find a whisper. We discover that not all dinosaurs vanished. Deep within the freezing, darkened remnants of the ancient forests, amidst the decaying vegetation and the freezing mud, a profound miracle of survival was quietly unfolding. A small branch of these ancient predators survived that catastrophe. They were not the multi-ton titans like the Tyrannosaurus rex or the armored fortresses like the Allosaurus. The very traits that had made those giants invincible during the warm, abundant days of the Cretaceous period had become their absolute doom in the impact winter. Instead, the survivors were marginalized creatures, small, feathered beings that had spent millions of years darting through the underbrush, living in the shadows of the giants. They were no longer giant monsters towering meters above the ground, and they no longer hunted massive prey across the ancient plains. But they changed in order to survive. To understand how these tiny creatures navigated an apocalyptic landscape that annihilated the most powerful predators in history, we must look at the brilliant efficiency of their biology. It may have been their smaller size, ability to conserve energy, and rapid adaptation that helped them overcome the extinction event. When the global food web collapsed due to the lack of sunlight, a massive body requiring thousands of calories a day was a death sentence. But a creature the size of a pigeon or a small raven required only a fraction of that energy. Furthermore, many of these small theropods had evolved specialized toothless beaks. While the leafy canopies had withered and died, the forest floor was still littered with millions of seeds and nuts, tiny, durable capsules of concentrated fat and protein that could withstand the freezing temperatures. With their specialized beaks, these small survivors could crack open this hidden bounty, sustaining themselves while the strictly carnivorous or leaf-eating giants slowly starved. Additionally, the feathers that had originally evolved for display or early flight became the ultimate biological insulation. As global temperatures plummeted, the dense layer of plumage trapped their body heat, allowing them to regulate their internal temperature against the biting chill of the impact winter. These were the theropod dinosaurs, the group of creatures that later evolved into the modern birds we see every day. Through the agonizing crucible of mass extinction, nature selected for modesty, efficiency, and resourcefulness over brute strength and overwhelming size. While larger species could not survive the harsh changes of Earth, the disappearance of dinosaurs was not only a disaster, but also a great transformation in the history of life. The sweeping narrative of the prehistoric world teaches us a deeply humbling lesson about our place in the universe. They did not completely vanish. Instead, they changed their form to continue existing. And this is the greatest secret revealed by fossils. The strongest is not always the largest, but the creature with the ability to adapt and evolve through every transformation of the world. Millions of years ago, Earth was once a world ruled by giant predators such as Tyrannosaurus rex, Velociraptor, and Allosaurus. Every dinosaur species developed its own weapons, from terrifying claws, hunting speed, and coordination abilities to the survival strategies that still carry traces of prehistoric assassins into the world today. When you wake up tomorrow morning and listen to the gentle song of a sparrow outside your window, or watch a hawk circling effortlessly on a thermal updraft, you are not merely looking at modern animals. You are witnessing the unbroken, magnificent legacy of the theropod lineage. Yet, their traces still remain because part of the dinosaur lineage continued to evolve and survive in the form of creatures that soar through the skies today. The journey of prehistoric assassins has not ended, but has only moved into a new chapter in the history of evolution. The same genetic blueprint that once engineered the sickle claws of the raptor and the bone-crushing jaws of the tyrant lizard king now engineers the delicate, aerodynamic flight feathers of a swallow. In the end, what truly creates the most dangerous creature is not strength or size, but the ability to change in the face of environmental challenges. The true masters of this planet are not those who attempt to forcefully dominate their surroundings with unyielding rigidity, but those who are willing to bend, to shrink, to transform, and to find new ways to breathe when the air itself changes. Dinosaurs did not dominate Earth through power alone. They survived because of evolution, and that is the true secret behind the greatest predators in history. As the ancient dust settles, and the shadows of the giant titans fade gently into the stone, we invite you to close your eyes and find comfort in the endless, resilient flow of life. Thank you for walking with quiet expeditions through the deep forests of time. If you found peace and wonder in this journey, please subscribe to our channel and let the quiet whispers of the ancient world carry you into a deep, restful sleep. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with the magnificent echoes of the past.